Black Friday. Every major electronics retailer in the country is slashing prices up to 40%, doorbuster lines wrapped around parking lots before sunrise, employees in matching vests hauling flat screens to cars at 6 in the morning. One company's website looks exactly the same as it did the day before. Same prices. Same for products on the homepage. Not a single banner announcing a sale. That company made more profit last fiscal year than Walmart, ExxonMobil, and Ford combined, and it did it by refusing to do the one thing nearly every other retailer on earth treats as non-negotiable. By the end of this, you'll understand the exact psychological and financial mechanism that lets one company protect its price for decades, and why the moment a company like this discounts too easily, it loses more value than the sale could ever generate. I'm Steve, and this is Wealth Maps, where we learn real financial lessons through stories, business, psychology, and companies that reveal how money really works. Let's get into why Apple almost never discounts. Go back to 1997, and Apple is 90 days from bankruptcy, selling a chaotic lineup of nearly 40 different products, most of them competing against each other on price, indistinguishable to anyone standing in an electronics aisle trying to figure out which one they actually needed. Steve Jobs, freshly returned as interim CEO, did something that looked, at the time, like corporate suicide. He drew a simple 4-box grid on a whiteboard, consumer and professional, desktop and portable, and killed almost everything that didn't fit inside it. Down to 4 core products. No budget tier racing to the bottom. No confusing sale rack. Just a small number of things, priced high, and left there. Here's the first lesson hiding inside that decision, and it's one almost no struggling company ever has the nerve to actually follow, because it feels backwards in exactly the moment a company needs cash the most. Discounting doesn't just move inventory. It teaches your own customers what your product is actually worth to you. Every markdown is a small confession. It tells the market the original price was never quite fixed in the first place, just an opening offer, waiting to be haggled down eventually if the customer simply waits long enough, the way everyone eventually learns not to pay full price at a car dealership because the sticker was never actually the point. Apple built its entire pricing culture around avoiding that confession, and it extended the discipline beyond its own stores entirely, into every store that carries its products at all. Apple's agreements with authorized resellers include strict minimum advertised price rules. Retailers carrying Apple products can't advertise below a certain floor. Even during their own store-wide sales events, even during the exact week every other electronics brand in the building is slashing prices around them by 30 or 40%. Walk through any big box electronics store during a holiday sale, and the Apple section looks almost eerily calm compared to the aisles surrounding it, an island of steady prices inside a sea of red tags, a deliberate visual contrast Apple negotiates into its contracts rather than leaves to chance. Picture 2 customers on the same Saturday afternoon, in 2 different stores, buying the same category of product. In one store, fluorescent lights, a wall of flat screens each with a bigger red price slash than the last, a salesperson working partly on commission who steers the customer toward a bundle, a warranty upsell, a today-only markdown time to create urgency before the customer has time to think it over. There's a countdown clock on a sign somewhere, because scarcity sells faster than confidence does. In the other store, wood tables, natural light, an employee wearing a blue shirt with no name tag advertising a title, salaried, earning exactly the same whether the customer buys the display model or nothing at all, answers a question and lets the customer decide on their own time, in their own silence, with nobody hovering. Apple Store employees are trained, famously, not to lean on the word sale at all, because the store was designed from the beginning to feel less like a transaction and more like a visit, somewhere you go to try something, ask a question, and leave whenever you're ready, with or without a bag in your hand. One experience feels like a negotiation. The other feels like a museum. Apple built its entire retail model, deliberately, around the second feeling, because a museum doesn't put its art on clearance, and neither does a company trying to sell you the idea that what you're buying is worth more than money can casually discount. That's not just a cultural preference. It's a documented pricing strategy called price skimming, setting a price high enough, on a product exclusive enough, that a company needs far fewer sales to hit its profit targets than a competitor racing on volume. Apple's overall gross margin reached a record 46.9% in its 2025 fiscal year, up from under 40% less than a decade earlier, and roughly double what many budget hardware makers operate on just to stay in business at all. That margin isn't leftover money after costs. It's close to the entire point of the strategy, built in from the first dollar of the price tag, not squeezed out after the fact through year-end clearance events that competitors depend on just to move enough units to stay profitable at all. Here's the part that actually explains the psychology, not just the accounting. Economists have a term for goods that behave the opposite of ordinary products, where demand doesn't fall as price rises, because the price itself is part of what's being purchased. Named after economist Thorstein Veblen, who first documented the pattern in 1899, a Veblen good gets less desirable, not more, the cheaper it becomes, because part of its value was never the object at all. It was what the price silently communicated to everyone who noticed you had it: the watch, the car, the logo visible from across a room. Apple doesn't sell phones the way Veblen goods are usually described. Most people genuinely need a phone, unlike a designer handbag nobody strictly requires. But it prices the way a Veblen good is priced, protecting the exact signal a discount would quietly erase the moment it appeared. This is the actual thesis underneath everything in this video. Apple protects the reference price, the number stamped on the box that every other number gets compared to, while finding every other lever available to make the product more attainable without ever touching that number in public. Ask yourself, when was the last time a 40% off sticker made something feel more valuable to you, instead of less? Try to actually remember one. Most people can't, because that's not how the signal works, and some part of every shopper's brain already knows it instinctively, long before anyone explains the theory behind it. There's a second mechanism running underneath the first one, and it's the reason Apple can afford to look this disciplined in the first place without bleeding customers to a competitor's Tuesday sale, and it has almost nothing to do with the product sitting on the shelf itself. Once someone owns an iPhone, a MacBook, AirPods, and an Apple Watch, switching to a competitor doesn't mean replacing one device. It means replacing an entire, interlocking system that talks to itself seamlessly, photos syncing automatically, messages appearing on every screen at once, passwords filling themselves in, a smartwatch that only fully works with one brand of phone in the world. Rebuilding all of that from scratch, on a different platform, is its own kind of cost, invisible on any receipt, paid entirely in hassle instead of dollars, the kind of cost most people only notice the one time they actually try to leave. Apple's active installed base surpassed 2.5 billion devices worldwide in early 2026, so large and so interconnected that the company barely needs to advertise anymore in the traditional sense. The ecosystem itself does the selling, one shared photo album and one synced calendar at a time, and switching costs, not price, become the thing actually keeping customers in place long after any individual product's novelty has worn off. A single parent buying their teenager a first iPhone isn't really making a one-time purchase decision. They're quietly enrolling that entire family into a platform that gets more expensive, in switching cost terms, with every additional device added to it over the following years. That's why Apple's Services division, the App Store, iCloud, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, Apple Pay, crossed $109 billion in its 2025 fiscal year, at margins above 70%, dramatically higher than hardware alone even at Apple's already unusual margins. The phone isn't just a product anymore. It's the front door to a subscription business that never needs a single markdown to keep growing, because almost nobody who owns 4 Apple devices, and pays a few small monthly subscriptions to keep them all humming together, is shopping around for a fifth device from someone else. The hardware sale happens once. The relationship it opens up keeps billing quietly in the background for years. Think about what that actually means for the original question. A discount on the iPhone would cost Apple real money in the moment it happened. But the deeper cost would be to everything downstream of that sale, the subscriptions, the accessories, the trade-in cycle 2 years later, all of it anchored to a price the customer now believes is fixed. Apple isn't just protecting a hardware margin when it avoids discounting. It's protecting the entire multi-year relationship the hardware sale is designed to open, which is why the strategy relies on more than restraint alone. None of this means Apple never lets a customer feel like they got a deal. It means the deal rarely comes wearing a discount clothing where the sticker price itself has to visibly move. Trade-in programs let a customer walk in with an old phone and walk out paying meaningfully less, sometimes several $100s less, without a single number on the actual price tag ever changing for anyone else standing in that store. Financing plans spread the same full price across monthly payments small enough to feel almost painless, an interest-free installment plan doing quietly, in the background, what a discount would have had to do loudly, in public, on a sign the whole store could see. Both accomplish something a straightforward markdown rarely could. The sticker price stays intact, protecting the signal every other customer in the store still sees, while the actual amount leaving any one individual's wallet quietly flexes underneath it, invisible to everyone except the person at the register. A discount broadcasts. A trade-in negotiates privately, one customer at a time, without ever touching the number that matters most to Apple's brand, the one printed on the box. And it isn't an unbreakable rule, worth being honest about rather than pretending Apple's discipline never bends at all. In early 2024, facing softer demand and mounting competition from domestic Chinese phone makers, Apple did trim iPhone prices directly in that one specific market, proof the strategy bends under real enough competitive pressure, rather than existing as some untouchable law of physics. When market share erodes fast enough, even a highly disciplined pricing strategy has a breaking point somewhere. But the core behavior, the one this video is actually about, held up almost everywhere else. No Black Friday doorbusters in its own stores. No clearance racks. No site-wide sale banner blinking across the homepage in November, the single biggest shopping event of the entire American calendar, one Apple has consistently declined to participate in on the terms everyone else has agreed to. Even under real pressure, in the one market where it adjusted, Apple reached for financing and trade-in value everywhere else before it ever reached for a straightforward markdown. Compare that to nearly every competitor selling a comparable device, running seasonal sales events that stack up faster every year, spring sales, summer sales, back-to-school sales, the entire fall calendar leading into Black Friday and Cyber Monday, each one training customers a little further to simply wait for the next one. Regular discounting does something to a brand that's hard to undo once it starts. It teaches customers to wait, specifically, deliberately, the way a shopper learns exactly which week a favorite store always runs its best sale and refuses to buy at any other time of year. Every sale trains the next purchase to be delayed until the following one, and the brand slowly becomes known less for the product itself than for the size of the markdown customers have learned to expect as a matter of course. Apple made the opposite bet in 1997, on the edge of bankruptcy, when betting on discipline looked like the least survivable option in the room. The company had roughly 90 days of cash left, by some accounts, and chose to make itself harder to buy on impulse rather than easier. Nearly 3 decades of pricing history since then has mostly kept proving that bet correct, right up to the current gross margins sitting close to 47% while competitors fight each other down to single-digit margins just to move comparable hardware off comparable shelves. There's one more mechanism worth naming before this closes out, because it explains something almost every Apple customer has felt without ever quite noticing why. Apple rarely sells just one version of anything. a base model, a Pro model, a Pro Max model, each one a few $100s apart. Behavioral economists call this a decoy structure, and it works less by making people want the most expensive option and more by making the middle option feel like the obviously reasonable choice, sandwiched between a base model that suddenly looks underpowered and a top model that suddenly looks excessive. Nobody has to be pressured into the middle tier. The other two tiers do the pressuring on their own, silently, just by existing next to it on the same page. That's price anchoring, and it's a third layer sitting quietly underneath everything else in this video, not a discount, rarely a discount, but a structure that moves customers toward higher spending anyway, using comparison instead of markdown to do a version of the same job a sale would have done at a competitor. Put all 4 layers together and the real strategy comes into focus. Protect the reference price so the product never looks negotiable. Use trade-ins and financing to quietly adjust what any one customer actually pays. Use the ecosystem and services to make the relationship worth more than any single sale. Use tiered pricing to move the average spend upward without ever posting a sale sign. None of these require a discount. All 4 exist specifically so a discount never has to happen. The lesson underneath all of this has nothing to do with owning a trillion-dollar company, and everything to do with a much smaller, much more personal question. Whatever you're selling, your time, your work, your own skills in a negotiation, the price you set is quietly teaching the people around you what you believe that thing is actually worth. Apple simply built an entire company around refusing to teach the world it could be talked down easily, in any of the dozens of ways companies quietly signal that they can. Go back to that Black Friday scene one more time. Somewhere in the same shopping center, a customer walks past the Apple store on their way to a competitor's doorbuster line, glances at the calm, unchanged storefront, and thinks, almost without registering the thought consciously, that Apple must simply not need the sale as badly as everyone else in that parking lot does. That impression is worth more to Apple than any single Black Friday's worth of revenue ever could be, because it isn't a one-day impression. It's the same impression that customer will carry into the store in March, in July, in whichever month they finally decide to buy, the quiet, durable sense that the price they're being asked to pay was never much of a negotiation to begin with, stated plainly, the way a museum states the value of what's hanging on its walls. So here's a question worth sitting with in the comments: is there something in your own life, your rate, your time, your own work, that you've been quietly discounting so often that the people around you have stopped expecting to pay full price for it at all? And what would it actually look like to stop confessing that it was negotiable in the first place?